can feel absurdly high. If it doesn't, it's not high enough. And whatever you picked, my advice to you would be raise it. Like I said, for myself, even before I had money, for the longest time, I used $5,000 an hour. And if you extrapolate that out into what it looks like as an annual salary, it's multiple millions of dollars per year. Ironically, I actually think I've beaten it. When I look back, because I'm not the hardest working person, I'm actually kind of a lazy person. So I work through bursts of energy where I'm really motivated with something. So if I actually look at how much I've earned per actual hour that I put in, it's probably quite a bit higher than that. So let's talk about hard work. There's this battle that happens on Twitter a lot between should you work harder and should you not? Like David Hauser's on there saying it's like you're slave driving people. And Keith Rabois is always on there saying like, no, all the great founders work their fingers to the bone. And they're talking past each other. First of all, they're talking about two different things. David is talking about employees in a lifestyle business, which is fine. Your number one thing in life, if you're doing that, is not getting wealthy. You have a job, you also have your family, you also have your life. But Keith is talking about the Olympics of startups. He's talking about the person going for the gold medal and trying to build a multi-billion-dollar public company. That person has to get everything right. They have to have great judgment. They have to pick the right thing to work on. They have to recruit the right team, and they have to work crazy hard because they're basically engaged in a competitive sprint. So if getting wealthy is your goal, you are going to have to work as hard as you can. But hard work is absolutely no substitute for who you work with and what you work on. What you work on is probably the most important thing. Finding product market founder fit, to expand on Mark Andreessen's definition, he came up with product market fit, but I would add product market founder fit, which is how well you are personally suited to that business. The combination, that three, that should be your overwhelming goal. And you can save yourself a lot of time if you pick the right area to work in. Picking the right people to work with is the next most important piece. And then third comes how hard you work. But they're like three legs of a stool. If you shortchange on any one of them, the whole stool is going to fall down. So it's not like you can pick one over the other that easily. So the order of operations when you're building a business is, or even building your career, is first figure out what should I be doing? What is something where there is a market that is emerging? There's a product that I can build that I'm excited to work on, and something where I have specific knowledge and I'm really into it. And then second, surround yourself with the best people possible. And no matter how high your bar is, raise your bar. Because you can never be working with other people who are great enough. If there's someone greater out there to work with, you should go work with them. I advise a lot of people who are looking at which startup to join in Silicon Valley. I say basically pick the one that's going to have the best alumni network for you in the future. Look at the PayPal mafia. They work with a bunch of geniuses, so they all got rich. So just try and pick based on the highest intelligence, energy, and integrity people that you can find. And then finally, once you've picked the right thing to work on and the right people to work with, then you work as hard as you can. This is where the mythology gets a little crazy. People will work 80, 120-hour weeks. A lot of that's just status signaling. It's showing off. Nobody really works 80 to 120 hours a week sustained at high output with mental clarity. Your brain breaks down. You just won't have good ideas. So really the way people tend to work most effectively, especially in knowledge work, is they sprint as hard as they can while they're working on something and they're inspired and they're passionate, and then they rest, they take long breaks. It's more like a lion hunting and much less like a marathon runner running. So you sprint, then you rest, you reassess, and then you try again. And what you end up doing is you end up building a marathon of sprints. Nivi just made the point to me on the side that inspiration is perishable, which is a very good point. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. This happens to me a lot with my tweet storms. I've actually come up with a whole bunch of additional tweet storms besides the ones that are already out there, but sometimes I just hesitate or I just pause and then it just dies. And what I've learned is if I'm inspired to write a blog post or to publish a tweet storm, I should probably do it right away. Otherwise, it's not going to get out there. I won't come back to it. So inspiration is a beautiful and powerful thing. And when you have it, just seize it. So people talk about impatience. When do you know to be impatient? When do you know to be patient? My glib tweet on this was impatience with actions and patience with results. And I think that's actually a good philosophy for life. Anything you have to do, just get it done. Why wait? You're not getting any younger. Your life is slipping away. You don't want to spend it waiting in line. You don't want to spend it traveling back and forth. You don't want to spend it doing things that you know ultimately aren't part of your mission. And when you do them, you want to do them as quickly as you can while you do them well with your full attention. But then you just have to give up on the results. You have to be patient with the results because you're dealing with complex systems. You're dealing with lots of people. It takes a long time for markets to adopt products. It takes time for people to get comfortable working with each other. It takes time for great products to emerge as you polish away. So impatience with actions, patience with results. And as Nivi said, inspiration is perishable. So when you have inspiration, act on it right then and there. If I have a problem that I discover in one of my businesses that needs to be solved, I won't sleep until at least the resolution is in motion. And this is just a personal failing. But if I'm on the board of a company, I'll call the CEO. If I'm running the company, I'll call my reports. If I'm responsible, I'll get on there right then and there and solve it. If I don't solve a problem the moment it happens, or I don't start moving towards solving it the moment it happens, I have no peace. I have no rest. I have no happiness until that problem is solved. So solve it as quickly as possible. I literally won't sleep until it's solved. Maybe that's a personal characteristic, but it's worked out well in business. We squander our time with the death of 1,000 cuts. So another tweet I had was, you should be too busy to do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered calendar. People who know me know that I'm famous for simultaneously doing two things. One is having a very clean calendar. I have almost no meetings on it. And there are people that I meet with, when they see my calendar, they almost weep. While at the same time, I am busy all the time. I'm always doing something. And it's usually quote unquote work related, but it is whatever the highest impact thing is that needs to be done at that time and that I'm most interested, inspired about. But the only way to do that is to constantly, ruthlessly decline meetings. People want to do coffee and build relationships, and that's fine early in your career when you're still exploring. But later in your career, when exploiting and there are more things coming at you than you have time for, you have to ruthlessly cut meetings out of your life. If someone wants to do a meeting, see if you can do it with a phone call instead. If they want to do a phone call, see if they can do it with an email instead. If they want to do it with email, see if they can do it with a text message instead. If they're text messaging, you should probably be ignoring most text messages unless they're true emergencies. So one has to be utterly ruthless about dodging meetings. When you do meetings, do walking meetings, do standing meetings, keep them short, keep them actionable, keep them small. Any meeting with 8 people in it sitting around a conference table, nothing is getting done in that meeting. You're literally just dying 1 hour at a time.
Doing coffee reminds me of an old quote, I think, from Steve Jobs when they asked him, hey, why doesn't Apple come to conventions? Or why don't you come to my convention? And his response was, well, then because we wouldn't be here working.
Yeah, I used to have a tough time turning people down for meetings, but now I just tell them outright. I just say, look, I don't do non-transactional meetings. I don't do meetings without a strict agenda. I don't do meetings unless we absolutely have to. Nivi used to do this. He would email people when they would ask Nivi and I for a meeting, like coffee meeting, get to know you. He would say, we don't do meetings unless it's life and death urgent. And then that person has to respond, yeah, it's life and death urgent, or there's no meeting. When you have something important or something valuable, other busy, interesting people will meet with you. Your calling card has to be, hey, here's what I'm done. Here's what I can show you. Let's meet, and I'll be respectful of your time if this is useful to you. And I find that there are very busy, important people who will take your meeting, but you have to come with a proper calling card. All the people who tweet and who email famous or rich people saying, hey, if I could just get one meeting with you, and they're vague about it, they're not going to get anywhere in life. You have to build up the credibility. When, for example, an investor in the tech business and the venture business looks at a startup, the first thing they want to see is they want to see some evidence of product progress. They don't just want to even see a slide deck. They want to see product progress, because the product progress is the resume for the entrepreneur. It is the unshakable, unfakeable resume. So you have to do the work. To use a crypto analogy, you have to have proof of work. If you have proof of work and you truly have something interesting, then you shouldn't hesitate to put it together in an email and send it to somebody. But even then, when you're asking for a meeting, you want to be super actionable about it. But I would say, even the other side, even if you yourself haven't made it yet, if you think you're going to make it by going out and networking and doing a whole bunch of meetings, you're probably incorrect. Yes, networking can be important early in your career. And yes, you can get serendipitous with meetings, but the odds are pretty low. And as we spent time talking about earlier, when you are just meeting people and hoping to get that lucky break, you're relying on type 1 luck, which is blind luck, and type 2 luck, which is hustle luck. But what you're not getting is type 3 or type 4 luck, which are the better kinds, where you spend time developing a reputation, working on something, developing a unique point of view, and being able to spot opportunities that others can't. A busy calendar and a busy mind will destroy your ability to do great things in this world. If you want to be able to do great things, whether you're a musician or whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you're an investor, you need free time and you need a free mind.
We just finished talking about the importance of working hard and valuing your time. Next, there's a few tweets on the topic of working for the long term. The first tweet is, become the best in the world at what you do. keep redefining what you do until this is true?
If you really want to get paid in this world, you want to be number one at whatever it is that you're doing. And it can be niche. That's the point. It can literally be you're getting paid for just being you. At this point, some of the more successful people in the world are that way. Oprah gets paid for being Oprah. Joe Rogan gets paid for being Joe Rogan. And they're being authentic to themselves. So what this tweet is trying to say simultaneously is that you want to be number one, but you want to keep changing what you do until you're number one. You can't just pick something arbitrary. You can't say, I'm going to be the fastest runner in the world, and now you got to beat Usain Bolt. That's too hard of a problem. But what you can do is you can keep changing what your objective is until it arrives to your specific knowledge, your skill sets, your position, your capabilities, your location, your interests, and then converges to making you number one. So when you're searching for what to do, you actually have two different foci that you have to keep in mind at all points. And one of those is, I want to be the best at what I do. And the second is, what I do is flexible so that I am the best at it, until you arrive at a comfortable place where you're like, yes, this is something I can be amazing at while still being authentic to who I am. And this is not going to be an overnight discovery. It's going to be a long journey, but at least you know how to think about it. The most important thing for companies to find product market fit, I would say the most important thing for an entrepreneur is to find founder product market fit, where you are naturally inclined to build the right product which has a market. And that's the three focus problem, which is you got to make all three of those work at once. If you want to be successful in life, you just have to get comfortable managing multivariate problems, multiple objective functions at once. And this is one of those cases where you have to map at least two or three at once.
This reminds me of your tweet about escaping competition through authenticity. It sounds like part of this is a search for who you are.
It's both a search and a recognition, because sometimes when we search our egos, we want to be something that we aren't. And our friends and family are better at telling us actually who we are, or looking back at what we've done is a better indicator of who we are. Peter Thiel talks a lot about how competition is besides the point. It's counterproductive. We're highly mimetic creatures. We copy what everybody else is doing around us. We copy our desires from them. If everyone around me is a great artist, I want to be an artist. If everyone around me is a great business person, I want to be a business person. Everybody around me is a social activist, I want to be a social activist. That's where my self-esteem will come from. You have to be a little careful when you get caught up in these status games that you end up competing over things that aren't worth competing over. So Peter Thiel talks about how he was going to be a law clerk because he was in law school and everybody around him wanted to be a law clerk for a Supreme Court justice or some famous judge. And he got rejected, and that's what made him go into business. So it helped him break out of a lesser game into a greater game. So sometimes you just get trapped in the wrong game because you're competing. And the best way to escape competition, to get away from the specter of competition, which is not just stressful and nerve wracking, but will often drive you to just the wrong answer. The way to escape competition is to just be authentic to yourself. If you are fundamentally building and marketing something that is just an extension of who you are, no one can compete with you on that. Who's going to compete with Joe Rogan or Scott Adams? It's impossible. Is somebody else going to come along and write a better Dilbert? No. Is someone going to compete with Bill Watterson and create a better Calvin and Hobbes? No. They're being authentic. This is easiest to see in art. Artists are, by definition, all naturally authentic. But even entrepreneurs are authentic. Who's going to be Elon Musk? Who's going to be Jack Dorsey? These people are authentic, and the businesses and products that they create are authentic to their desires and their means. If somebody else came along and started launching rockets, I don't think it would phase Elon one bit. He's still going to get to Mars because that's his mission. Insane as it seems, that's the one he set for himself, and he's going to accomplish it. So authenticity naturally gets you away from competition. It doesn't mean that you necessarily want to be authentic to the point where there's no product market fit. It may turn out you're the best juggler on a unicycle, but maybe there just isn't that much of a market for that, even with YouTube videos. So you got to adjust that somehow until you find product market fit, but at least lean towards authenticity, towards getting away from competition. And competition automatically leads towards copycatting and often towards just playing completely the wrong game. Especially in entrepreneurship, the masses are never right. If you see a lot of people tweeting about what a great market to enter is, or you see journalists talking about a company is terrible, they don't know anything. If the masses knew how to build great things and create great wealth, we'd all already be done. We'd all already be rich by now. So in a sense, when you see a lot of competition, sometimes that indicates to you that the masses are already here. So it's already competed over too much and there's nothing here, or it's in the wrong trend to begin with. On the other hand, if it's completely empty, if the whole market is empty and no one's there, that can also be a warning indicator that you've gone too authentic and not enough on the product market fit part of founder product market fit. So there's a balance. You have to find it. But generally, most people will make the mistake of paying too much attention to the competition and being too much like the competition and not being authentic enough. And the great founders tend to be authentic iconoclasts.
I hate to bring up the Scott Adams skill stack one more time, but I'll still bring it up. Do you think one way of getting to authenticity is not necessarily adding some random skills that you think might be important, but just really finding 5 or 6 various skills that you already authentically do and just stacking them on top of each other, and not even in any purposeful way? If you are expressing who you are, you're going to be expressing all these little 5 or 6 different skills anyway.
That's really where life is going to lead you anyway. Long term, if you are good and successful at what you do, you will find that whatever your hobbies were, you're almost doing them for a living. As Robert Frost said, combine your vocation and your avocation, what you love to do and what you do. So I think you'll find yourself there anyway. And you're right about the skill stack and that everyone's got multiple skills. We aren't all one-dimensional creatures, even though that's how we have to portray ourselves in our online profiles to get employed. You meet somebody and they say, I'm a banker or I'm a bartender or I'm a barber or what have you, all the bees. But people are multivariate. They have a lot of skills. One banker might be good at finance, another one might be good at sales, a third one might be just good at macroeconomic trends and have a feel for the markets. Another one might be really good at picking individual stocks. Another one might just be good at maintaining relationships rather than selling new relationships. So everyone's going to have their various niches, and you're going to have multiple niches, not going to be just one. So over time, you will find as you go through your career, both you will gravitate towards the things that you're good at, which by definition are almost the things you enjoy doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be good at them. You wouldn't have put in the time. And other people will push you towards the things that you're good at because your smart bosses and your smart coworkers and your smart investors will realize, okay, you're really world class in this thing. We can recruit somebody else for that other thing. So ideally, you want to end up specializing in being you.
I think when you're being authentic, you don't really mind competition that much. Yeah, it pisses you off and it inspires some fear and jealousy and all the other emotions that come along with it. But also, you don't really mind because you're more oriented towards the goal and the mission. And worst case, you get some ideas from them. And there's often ways to work with the competition in a positive way. And it ends up increasing the size of the market for you.
Yeah, sometimes it depends on the nature of the business. Silicon Valley tech industry businesses tend to be winner take all, at least the good ones. And so when you see competition, it can make you fly into a rage because it really does endanger everything you've built. Whereas if I was opening a restaurant and a more interesting version of the same restaurant opens up in a different town, that's fantastic. I'm just going to lift from them what's working and drop what I can see that they have already figured out is not working. So it does depend to some extent on the nature of the business. That said, even the businesses that seem like that they are often in direct competition really aren't. They can end up adjacent or slightly different. You're one step away from a completely different business, and sometimes you need to take that one step, and you're not going to be able to take it if you're busy fighting over a booby prize. Kind of, you're playing a stupid game, you're going to win a stupid prize, and it's not obvious right now because you're blinded by competition, but 3 years from now, it'll be obvious. To give a simple example, when I was first starting companies, one of my first ones was called Opinions, which was an online product review site for all the products out there that was independent of Amazon. And that space eventually turned into TripAdvisor and Yelp, which is where we should have gone. We should have done more local reviews because there's more value to having a review of a scarce item like in a local restaurant than it is of an item like a camera, which is going to have 1,000 reviews on Amazon. But before we could get there, we got caught up in the whole comparison shopping game. And so we ended up merging with Deal Time and we competed with My Simon and BizRate, which became Shopzilla and Price Grabber and Nextag and a whole bunch of these price comparison engines. And we're all caught in fierce competition with each other. And that whole space went to zero because it turns out Amazon won e-tail completely. So there was no need for price comparison. Everyone just went to Amazon. But we got the booby prize because we were caught in a competition with a bunch of our peers, when really we should have been looking at what the consumer really wanted and being authentic to ourselves, which was reviews and not price comparison, and gone more and more esoteric items that needed to be reviewed where customers had less and less data and wanted reviews more badly. So if we'd stayed authentic to ourselves, we would have done better.
We're still talking about working for the long term. The next tweet on that topic is apply specific knowledge with leverage, and eventually you will get what you deserve. I would also add to that apply judgment, apply accountability, and apply the skill of reading.
This one is just a glib way of saying that it takes time. Even once you have all of these pieces in place, there is an indeterminate amount of time that you're going to have to put in. And if you're counting, you will run out of patience before it actually arrives. So you just have to make sure that you give these things a proper time. Life is long. Charlie Munger had some line on this. Somebody asked him about making money, and he reinterpreted that. And he said, what the questioner is actually asking is, how do I get rich like you, but faster, before I end up as a really old guy? And everybody wants it immediately, but the world is an efficient place. Immediate doesn't work. You do have to put in the time, you do have to put in the hours. And so I think you just have to put yourself in the position with the specific knowledge, with the accountability, with the leverage, with the authentic skill set that you have to be the best in the world at what you do. And then you have to enjoy it and just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, and don't keep track and don't keep count. Because if you do, you will run out of time. I can look back at my career and the people 2 decades ago that I had identified as brilliant and hardworking, but hadn't thought much more about it, they're all successful now, almost without exception. On a long enough time scale, you do get paid, but it can easily be 10 or 20 years. Sometimes it's 5, and if it's 5 or 3 and a friend of yours got there, it can drive you insane. But those are exceptions, and for every winner, there's multiple failures. One thing that's important in entrepreneurship is you just have to be right once. You get many, many shots on goal. You can take a shot on goal every 3 to 5 years, maybe every 10 at the slowest, or once every year at the fastest, depending on how you're iterating with startups. But you really only have to be right once.
My little equation is that your eventual outcome will be equal to something like the distinctiveness of your specific knowledge times how much leverage you can apply to that knowledge times how often your judgment is correct times how singularly accountable you are for the outcome times how much society values what you're doing. And then you compound all of that with how long you can keep doing it and how long you can keep improving it through reading and learning.
That's actually a really good way to summarize it. It's probably worth even trying to sketch that equation out. That said, people try to then apply mathematics to what is really philosophy. So I've seen this happen in the past where I say one thing and then I say another thing that seems contradictory if you treat it as a math equation, but it's obviously in a different context. And then people will say, well, you say that desire is suffering. That's the Buddhist saying. And then you say that all greatness comes from suffering. So does that mean all greatness comes from desire? And it's like, well, this isn't math, people. You can't just start carrying variables around and forming absolute logical outputs. You have to know when to apply things. So I think that is very useful to understand. But at the same time, one can't get too analytical about it. It's what a physicist would call false precision. When you take two made up estimates and you multiply them together and then you get 4 degrees of precision, those decimal points don't actually count. You don't have that data, you don't have that knowledge. In a model, the more estimated variables you have, the greater the error in the model. So just adding more and more complexity to your decision making process actually gets you a worse answer. You're better off just picking the single biggest thing or two. For example, what am I really good at according to observation and according to people that I trust that the market values? Like that alone, those two variables alone are probably good enough. Because if you're good at it, you'll keep it up. And if you're good at it, you'll develop the judgment. And if you're good at it and you like to do it, eventually people will give you the resources and you won't be afraid to take on accountability. So all the other pieces will fall in place. Product market fit is inevitable if you're doing something you love to do and the market wants it.
Regarding the guy that gets rich in 5 years, one of the tweets that you had on the cutting room floor was avoid people who got rich quickly. They're just giving you their winning lottery ticket numbers.
This is generally true of advice anyway, which is it's back to Scott Adams systems, not goals. If you ask a specific person what worked for them, very often it's just like they're reading out the exact set of things that work for them, which may not be applicable for you. They're just reading their winning lottery ticket numbers. It's a little glib. There is something to be learned from them, but you can't just take their exact circumstance and map it onto yours. The best founders I know, they listen and read to everyone, but then they ignore everybody and they make up their own mind. They have their own internal model of how to apply things to their situation, and they do not hesitate to discard information. If you survey enough people, all the advice will cancel to zero. So you do have to have your own point of view. And when something is sent your way, you have to very quickly decide, is that true? Is that true outside of the context of what that person applied it in? Is it true in my context? And then do I want to apply it? You have to reject most advice, but you have to listen to and read enough of it to know what to reject and what to accept. Even in this podcast, you should examine everything. If something does not feel true to you, put it down, set it aside. If too many things seem untrue, delete this podcast.
I think the most dangerous part of taking advice is that the person that gave it to you is not going to be around to tell you when it doesn't apply any longer.
Yeah, I view the purpose of advice as a little different than most people. I just view it as helping me have anecdotes and maxims that I can then later recall when I have my own direct experience and say, that's what that person meant. 90% of my tweets are actually just maxims that I carve for myself that are then little mental hooks to remind me when I'm in that situation again, like, oh, I'm the one who tweeted, if you can't see yourself working with someone for life, then don't work with them for a day. So as soon as I know that this person is not going to be someone that I'm going to be working with 10 years from now, then I have to start extricating myself from that relationship or just not investing that much more effort into it. So I use my tweets and other people's tweets as maxims that help compress my own learnings and be able to recall them. Because the brain space is finite. You have finite neurons. So you can almost think of these as pointers, addresses, mnemonics to help you remember deep-seated principles where you have the underlying experience to back it up. If you don't have the underlying experience, then it just reads like a collection of quotes. It's like, it's cool, it's inspirational for a moment, maybe you make a nice poster out of it, but then you forget it and move on. So all of these are really just compact ways for you to recall your own knowledge.
The last tweet on the topic of working for the long term is that when you're finally wealthy, you'll realize that it wasn't what you were seeking in the first place. But that's for another day.
That's a multi-hour topic in of itself. First of all, I just thought it was a really clever way to end the whole thing because it disarms a whole set of people who say, well, what's the point of getting rich? Because there are a lot of people who just like to status signal, virtue signal against the idea of wealth creation or making money. So it was just a good way to disarm all of them. But it's also true in that the things that you really want in life, yes, money will solve all your money problems, but it doesn't get you everywhere. The first thing you'll realize when you've made a bunch of money is that you're still the same person. If you're happy, you're happy. If you're unhappy, you're unhappy. If you're calm and fulfilled and peaceful, you're still that same person. I know lots of very rich people who are extremely out of shape. I know lots of rich people who have really bad family lives. I know lots of rich people who are internally a mess. So I would lean on another tweet that I put out, which is actually, when I think back on it, I think it's my favorite tweet of mine. It's not necessarily the most insightful. It's not necessarily the most helpful. It's not even the one I think about the most, but when I look at it, there's just such a certain truth in there that it just resonates. And that is that a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought. They must be earned. Even if you have all the money in the world, you can't have those three things. Jeff Bezos still has to work out. He still has to work in his marriage or whatever his next relationship is. And his internal mental state is still going to be very much not controlled by external events. It's going to be based on how calm and peaceful he's inside. So I think those three things, your health, your mental health, and your close relationships, are things that you have to cultivate and can probably bring you a lot more peace and happiness than any amount of money ever will. So that's what I meant. Now, how to get there is actually a tweet storm that I still need to put out. I've been working on it. I have probably 100 tweets on it. It's just very hard to say anything on the topic without getting attacked from 50 different directions, especially these days on Twitter. So I've been hesitant to do it because I want to target it for a very specific kind of person. There's a bunch of people who don't believe that working on your internal state is useful. They're too focused on the external. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They should do that. And that's who the How to Get Rich Tweet Storm is for. There's a bunch of people who believe that the only thing worth working on is complete liberation, like you become the Buddha, and they'll attack anything in the middle as being useless. That's fine too, but most people aren't there. So what I want to do is to create a tweet storm that is just very practical advice for everyday people who want to have a calmer internal state. Just a set of understandings, realizations, half truths, and truths that if you were to imbibe them properly, and again, these are just pointers to ideas that you already have and experiences that you already have, that if you keep these top of mind, slowly but steadily, it will help you with certain realizations that will lead you to a calmer internal state. That's what I want to work on. Fitness is another big one. I'm just not the expert there. There are plenty of good people on Twitter who are better at fitness than me. And I think loving household and relationships actually automatically falls out of the other things. If you have a calm mind and if you've already made money, you should have good relationship. There's no reason why you shouldn't. A lot of divorces actually happen over money. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. So having money removes that part of it. A lot of external battles happen because your internal state is not good. When you're naturally internally peaceful, you're going to pick less fights. You're going to be more loving without expecting anything in return, and that will take care of things on the external relationship front.
So money solves your money problems. Money buys you freedom in the material world. I think that was a tweet from your cutting room floor. And money lets you not do the things that you don't want to do.
Yeah, to me, the ultimate purpose of money is so that you do not have to be in a specific place at a specific time doing anything you don't want to do.
We skipped one tweet because I wanted to cover all of the tweets on the topic of the long term. And the tweet that we skipped was, "There are no get rich quick schemes. That's just someone else getting rich off you."
This goes back to the world being an efficient place. If there's an easy way to get rich, it's already been exploited. And there are a lot of people who will sell you ideas and schemes on how to make money, but they're just always selling you some $79.95 course or some audiobook or some seminar, which is fine. Everyone needs to eat. People need to make a living. They might actually have really good tips. But if they're giving you actionable, high quality advice that acknowledges that it's a difficult journey and will take a lot of time, then I think that's realistic. But if they're selling you some get rich quick scheme, whether it's crypto or whether it's an online business or seminar, they're just making money off you. That's their get rich quick scheme. It's not going to necessarily work for you. One of the things about this whole Tweetstorm and podcast is that we don't have ads on here. We don't charge for anything. We don't sell anything. Not because I don't want to make more money. It's always nice to make more money. We're doing work here, but because it would completely destroy the credibility of the enterprise. If I'm saying, hey, I know how to get rich and I'm going to sell that to you, it ruins it. When I was young and I was kind of studying up on the topic, one of my favorite books on the topic was actually called How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis, the founder of Maxim magazine, billionaire who passed away. And he had a lot of crazy stuff in there, but he had some really good insights too. But whenever I read something by him or by the GoDaddy founder, Bob Parsons, or say Andrew Carnegie, you read stuff by people who are already very wealthy and they've clearly made their wealth in other fields, not by selling the how to get rich line. They have credibility. You just trust them. And they're not trying to make money off of you. They are obviously trying to win some status and some ego, right? You always have to have a motivation for doing something. But at least that is a cleaner reason why they're probably not lying. They're probably not fooling you. They're not snowing you. At some level, every founder has to lie to every employee of the company that they have, where they have to convince them that it's better for you to work for me than it is to do what I did and go work for yourself. So I've always had a hard time with that, which is why the only honest way in my companies, I've recruited entrepreneurs. And I tell them, you're going to get to be entrepreneurial in this company. And the day you're ready to go start your own next thing, I'm going to support you. I'm never going to get in the way of you starting a company. But this can be a good place for you to learn how to build a good team and build a good culture, how to find product market fit, to perfect your skills and meet some amazing people while you figure out exactly what it is you're going to do, because positioning, timing, deliberation are very important when starting a company. But what I've never been able to do is look them in the face and say, you must be at your desk by 8 a.m. because I'm not going to be at my desk by 8 a.m. I want my freedom. Or say to them that you're great at being a director today and you'll be a VP tomorrow, putting them into that career path track, because I don't believe in it myself. If anyone is giving advice on how to get rich and they're also making money off of it, they should have made their money elsewhere. Like, you don't want to learn how to be fit from a fat person. You don't want to learn how to be happy from a depressed person. So you don't want to learn how to be rich from a poor person, but you also don't want to learn how to be rich from somebody who makes their money by telling people how to be rich. It's suspect.
Anytime you see somebody who's actually gotten rich following some guru's advice on getting rich, just remember that in any random process, if you run it long enough and if enough people participate in it, you will always get every single possible outcome with probability 1.
There's a lot of random error in there. And then also, this is why you have to absolutely and completely ignore business journalists and economist academics when they talk about private companies. I won't even name names, but like when a famous economist rails on Bitcoin or when a business journalist attacks the latest company that's IPOing, it's complete nonsense. Those people have never built anything. They're professional critics. They don't know anything about making money. All they know is how to criticize and get page views. And you're literally becoming dumber by reading them. You are burning neurons. I'll leave you with a quote from Nassim Taleb that I liked, where he said, "If you want to be a philosopher king, first become a king and then become a philosopher, not first become a philosopher and then become a king."
I'm glad you brought up Taleb because I was going to finish this by saying just remember the title of his first book, which is Fooled by Randomness.
One of the reasons why we're a little vague in this podcast is because we're trying to lay down principles that are timeless as opposed to just giving you the winning lottery ticket numbers from yesterday.
You summarized this entire tweet storm with 2 words: productize yourself.
Productize and yourself. Yourself has uniqueness. Productize has leverage. Yourself has accountability. Productize has specific knowledge. Yourself also has specific knowledge in there. So all of these pieces, you can combine them into these 2 words. Whenever you're doing anything in business, if you're looking towards a long term of getting wealthy, you should ask yourself, is this authentic to me? Is it myself that I am projecting? And then am I productizing it? Am I scaling it? Am I scaling with labor or with capital or with code or with media? So it's a very handy, simple mnemonic. I mean, what is this podcast? This is a podcast called Naval. I'm literally productizing myself with a podcast.
You want to figure out what you're uniquely good at or what you uniquely are and apply as much leverage as possible. So making money isn't even something you do. It's not a skill. It's who you are stamped out a million times.
Making money should be a function of your identity and what you like to do. Another tweet that I really liked was, this was not mine, somebody else put this up. They said, find 3 hobbies, one that makes you money, one that keeps you fit, and one that makes you creative. I would change that slightly. So I would say one that makes you money, one that makes you fit, and one that makes you smarter. So in my case, my hobbies would be reading. Making money is I love working with startups, either investing in them, brainstorming them, starting them. I just love that ideation and initial creation phase around startups. And then on the hobby that keeps you fit, I don't really have one. Closest thing I have is yoga, but that's where I fell apart. And I think people who early in life discover something like surfing or swimming or tennis or some sport that they continue doing throughout most of their life are very lucky because they found a hobby that'll make them fit.
We've finished discussing the tweet storm, and we're going to spend some time on Q&A and discussing some of the tweets on the cutting room floor that didn't make it into the tweet storm. My first question is, do you think there are some common failure modes or typical things that people do wrong when they're trying to apply this advice?
A lot of people don't understand what specific knowledge really is or how to quote unquote obtain it. People don't understand what accountability really entails. They think that accountability means being successfully accountable. No, it means that you have to stick your neck out and fail with your name out there publicly and be willing to let people hate on you. One of the reasons I'm less active on Twitter lately is because every tweet summons an army of nitpickers and haters and it gets exhausting. But on the other hand, you have to learn how to ignore them. Otherwise, you can't survive on Twitter. A lot of people try to reconcile it with, like, should I quit my 9 to 5 job or not? That can be a very hard decision. I don't think you need to go that extreme. You can start applying accountability and leverage and specific knowledge even within your existing career. It doesn't have to necessarily be fork off and do something else completely. A lot of people will use it as a way to agree and disagree with their existing biases. They'll say, oh, yeah, I agree with that part, or that part, you're completely wrong. The most interesting parts should be the ones that you disagree with, because clearly I've proven that I know a few things. So if you disagree with it, then maybe that is an area where you can improve your thinking. I've definitely improved my thinking all the time, but I will tell you that in this tweet storm, I put down the minimum viable principles. I did not put down the whole universe of what I know about how to make money because 90% of it is suspect. I put down the bedrock, the stuff that I'm pretty solidly sure about. And I have not yet seen a tweet that has successfully contradicted anything in this tweet storm that would cause me to say, oh, yeah, I got that one wrong. I think another place where people get a little bit off is they look at this and they say, well, this only applies to tech entrepreneurs. I disagree. The example that I gave about real estate was a good one in that regard. It's just the nature of leverage that technology drives leverage. So I'm going to push you in a tech direction to get the free leverage that is available in tech. And obviously, this message is being delivered through the internet. So it's going to have a pro internet bias. There are also people who believe that it is unfair to the people who don't have these opportunities to do anything with the opportunities that they do have. With that defeatist attitude, why even get out of bed in the morning? 90% of people are dead. There's a lot of people who are living on $1 a day. Do you live on $1 a day? No, it's up to you to play the hand that you're dealt to the best of your ability. And then you can take the winnings, the pot from that hand, and do whatever you want with it to fix the world. But saying that you should not do things just because others can't do things is living in denial. It's an excuse to not do anything. There are also people who believe that wealth creation is fundamentally at odds with an environmentally safe and healthy planet. And they view the whole thing as a giant zero sum game. That's a false narrative as well. Elon Musk is not playing a zero sum game with the environment, and there are plenty of entrepreneurs who are not. If anything, there is a word that environmentalists love, which is sustainability. And for profit businesses are at least financially sustainable, if nothing else. You can do a B Corp, which has a dual mission. A lot of nonprofit efforts would actually be better served by for profit companies because then they wouldn't have to go begging for grants all the time. They would be financially sustainable. Some great founders realize their philanthropic visions by running a business.
Who is this advice targeted to? Is it for my Lyft driver? Is it for an internet entrepreneur? Is it for somebody who wants to start a YouTube channel?
Because it comes from someone who's steeped in Silicon Valley and tech companies, it's always going to have a bias towards that. But I think it's good for anybody who wants to be entrepreneurial, anybody who wants to control their own life, anybody who wants to deterministically and reliably improve their ability to create wealth over time, is patient and looking at it for the long haul. And certainly, if you're 80 years old, retired, running out of energy, you should probably just stay retired. But there are 80-year-olds who have a lot of energy and want to do new things and live for the future. It can obviously apply very easily to a young person, I would say 9, 10 years old and up. The most difficult one is probably middle aged because when we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, we already have a lot invested. We have a lot of obligations because those are the years where we're earning and people are relying upon us. We don't want to change because we don't want to admit defeat in what we've been doing to date. But that's where it can actually be the most fruitful. It may be the most difficult pivot. You have a 9 to 5 job, you have a family relying upon you. And so it may seem like the things in this podcast are far too idealistic, but maybe it can inform your weekend projects. Maybe it can inform your self re education that you do at night on the internet. Maybe it can inform what roles you take on in the company that you're at because they move you closer and closer to points of leverage, points of judgment, or points where you're naturally good at and you're authentic. It might cause you to take on more accountability. Even applied piecemeals, these principles can directionally guide you regardless of what stage you are at in life short of retirement. And if you're in retirement, just test them to see if they're true and then teach them to your kids or your grandkids. There's many different ways to participate. It should really apply to almost everybody who has a complete body, sound mind, and is looking to work.
I think one way to apply the advice is to look at who is getting the leverage off of the work that you're doing. Look up the value chain, look at who's above you and who's above them, and see how they are taking advantage of the time and the work that you're doing and how they're applying leverage to it. People do that naturally in that they want to move up the corporate ladder, but that's mostly about managing other people. And what you really want to be doing is managing more capital, products, media, and community. People think about moving up the ladder in their organization, but they don't think that often about moving to a different organization or creating their own organization to get more leverage.
In general, ceteris paribus, fancy Latin words for all other things equal, you will do better in a smaller organization than a larger one. You will have more accountability, it'll be more visible. You are more likely to be able to try on multiple things to find out the thing that you are uniquely good at. People are more likely to give you leverage through battlefield promotions. You're going to have more flexibility. There'll be more authenticity to how the company operates. A good progression for a career: start out in a large company and then progressively move to smaller and smaller ones. It's very hard to go from a small company to working in a larger company. Larger companies tend to be more about politics and less about merit. They're more stable, but they're less innovative situations. The goal long term is, if we are all wealthy, is that we're all working for ourselves, and the people who are working for us are essentially robots. And today that's software robots in data centers executing code. Tomorrow it could be delivery bots, flying bots, mechanical bots that are carrying things around. This goes back to this idea of the best relationships are peer relationships. If there's someone above you, then that's someone to learn from. If you're not learning from them and improving, then there shouldn't be anybody above you. If there's somebody below you, it's because you're teaching them and enabling them. If you're not teaching them and enabling them, then get a robot underneath. You don't need a human being below you. This is utopian and it's a long ways off. But in the not too distant future, anybody who wants to work for themselves will be able to work for themselves. You may have to make other sacrifices. You may have to take on more risk. You may have to take on more accountability. You may have less steady income. But more and more, I think the younger generation is realizing that if they're going to work, they're going to work for themselves.
In one of your tweets, you listed out some of the things you should study, like programming, sales, reading, writing, arithmetic. One of the items that ended up on the cutting room floor was that you should also study ethics.
I was originally going to put that out there as a concession to people who believe that making money is evil and that the only way to make it is evil. But then I realized ethics is not necessarily something you study. It's something you think about and it's something you do. Every one of us has a personal moral code. And where you got that moral code from is different for everybody. It's not like I can point you to a textbook. Sure, I could point you some Roman and Greek text, but that's not going to suddenly make you ethical. There's the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or there's Nassim Taleb's silver rule, which is don't do unto others what you don't want them doing unto you. Once you've been in business long enough, you will realize how much of business is about trust. And it's about trust because you want to compound interest. You want to be able to work for long periods of time with trustworthy people without having to reevaluate every discussion, without having to rethink each time, and without having to constantly look over your shoulder. And so over time, you gravitate towards working with certain kinds of people. And similarly, those people will gravitate towards working with other ethical, quote unquote, people. So being ethical turns out to be a selfish imperative. You want to be ethical because it attracts the other long term players in the network, and then they want to do business with you. And if you build a good enough reputation for being ethical, eventually people will pay you just to do deals through you because you're the one who will validate and ensure the deals by your presence because you wouldn't be involved with low quality stuff. So being ethical actually pays off in the long run, but it's the very long run. In the short run, being unethical pays off, which is why so many people go for it. It's a greedy algorithm. But you can be ethical simply because you're long term greedy. And I can even outline a framework for different parts of so called ethics just based on the idea of long term selfishness. For example, you want to be honest because it leaves you with a clear mind. You don't have two threads running in your head. One is the lies that you told you to keep track of, and the other one is what you're saying. You just have to think about one thing at a time. So you have more energy to think about that thing. So you're a clearer thinker. Also, by being honest, you're rejecting the people who only want to hear the pretty lies. So you force those people out of your network. And sometimes it's painful, like friends and family. But long term, you create room for the people who like you exactly the way that you are. So that is a selfish reason to be honest. For example, in negotiations, if you're the kind of person who always tries to get the best deal for yourself, you will win a lot of very early deals and it'll feel very good. But on the other hand, there are a few people who will recognize that you're always scrabbling and not acting fairly, and they will tend to avoid you. Over time, those people end up being the deal makers in the network because people go to them for a fair shake or to figure out what's fair. And so if you are cutting people fair deals, you don't get paid in the short term, but in the long term, everybody wants to deal with you and you end up being a market hub. You have more information, you have trust, you have reputation, and people end up doing deals through you. A lot of wisdom is just realizing the long term consequences of your actions. And so the longer term you're willing to look, the wiser that you're going to seem to everybody around you.
Do you want to tell us about some of the jobs that you had as a youth and the specific job that kicked off your fanatical obsession with creating wealth?
This gets a little personal, and I don't want to do the humble brag thing. There was some thread going around on Twitter about like name 5 jobs you've held, and every rich person on there was trying to signal how they held like normal jobs. So I don't want to play that game. I've held a bunch of menial jobs. There are people who have had it worse than me, people who had it better than me. There was one point where I was washing dishes in the school cafeteria, and I said, F this. I hate this. I can't do this anymore. and I sweet talked my way to a computer science prof of helping TA his CS class in algorithms when I myself was completely unqualified for that. And so it forced me to learn computer science algorithms so I could TA the rest of the course. But that desire came out of the suffering of washing the dishes in the college cafeteria, which is not to say there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with anything really, but it was just not for me. I did not enjoy it. I had an active mind and I wanted to make my money and earn my living through mental activities, not through physical activities. But sometimes it takes the suffering of doing the wrong thing to motivate you enough to do the right thing. I worked at a law firm for a while, a big prestigious law firm in New York City. I had a big internship there, and I basically got fired for surfing Usenet back in the day. This is before the internet was a big thing. Usenet was the news groups, and it was the only way for me to stay from being completely bored. And I was an overpaid guy wearing a tie and a suit, and I had to hang out in the conference room. When the lawyers needed photocopies, I would make photocopies. And in the meantime, I would be bored out of my skull. This is pre-iPhone. Thank God to Steve Jobs for saving us all from unending boredom. But I used to read the Wall Street Journal or anything that I could get my hands on. I would have read the back of a brochure just to keep from going insane.